Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX2, and even though EX2 is a smaller set than your usual set, we still have lots of new and powerful cards to build and iterate some new and existing decks with. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a new iteration on blue hybrids utilizing the Leomon package that we got from EX2. So the Leomon package is just including Jeri, and Jeri's a really good card to be able to play our Leomons for free just because we played our Jeri. And because Jeri is a tamer, it just allows us to synergize with our blue hybrids because, well, blue hybrids like digivolving on top of tamers, so it just gives us another point to digivolve on top of, while being able to play free bodies all at the same time. So that's kind of the whole intended synergy, and we do have some other really good cards to help make Jeri even better than she normally would be. But at the end of the day, it's still just going to be your stereotypical blue hybrid deck, where you're just going to sit on a whole bunch of tamers to get and accrue lots of value and try to out-resource the opponent, while then you're going to be using your tamers later in the game to act as digivolution points into our hybrids to be able to swing at the opponent to be able to try to win the game that way. The Leomons just help us gain some additional resource and be a little bit more aggressive than your stereotypical build. But with all that said and done, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Upamon. So Upamon is going to be the draw engine of the deck, just because we actually want to attack with our Digimon, because we're actually trying to digivolve into our Leomons sometime if we don't have the ability to play them for free off of our Jeri. So Upamon's when attacking ability helps us draw some cards where once per turn, if the opponent's Digimon has no Digivolution sources in it in play, which is something Blue Hybrids already wants to do, is strip away their inheritable sources, so that way it puts them in range for various abilities like Upamon to help us draw cards. And then the 5th Digitama of the deck I'm going to be running is going to be 1 copy of Kyaromon, just because we are still playing around with the whole getting rid of the opponent's inheritable abilities, so Kyaromon is just another card draw engine that plays around with that sub-theme. So Kyaromon, the big difference between it versus Upamon is you actually don't need to attack in order to get the card draw off of Kyaromon, but you could if you really wanted to, depending on what your field and setup is. So it has this nice ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of the opponent's Digimon's Digivolution sources is trashed, then we get to draw a card. So again, it's just acting as another Digitama to help with the overall card draw of the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Elecmon. So Elecmon is kind of a flex spot for the deck. It could be really any rookie you feel like you want to use, but I think Elecmon is still a pretty good card just because it has some solid stats. So its stat line is at 2 to hard play, 0 to evo, 3000 DP, making it just a really tempo efficient rookie to use, because if we have something in raising, and we don't want to move it out for whatever reason, we could just hard play an Elecmon to act as a choking tool because of how cheap it is to play, or if we just have enough memory, we could hard play Elecmon and then digivolve it, hopefully into a Leomon, to be able to get a Leomon out a little bit more easier and efficiently than just hard playing a Leomon outside of a Jeri. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gomamon. So this is the BT1 version of Gomamon, and this card is in the deck just to synergize with our Leomons. So our Leomons both have on-delete abilities native to them, so Gomamon combos with them with having an on-delete ability as an inheritable ability to give to our Leomons to extend the possibilities of what our Leomons on-delete abilities can do. So what Gomamon's on-delete ability states is we get to gain 1 memory, so it's just helping us with our overall memory efficiency, or trying to, on the opponent's turn, take away the opponent's memory to make their plays even harder or worse. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Strabimon. So Strabimon is going to be the deck's dedicated searcher for our hybrids and our tamers. So its on-play ability states that we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 Digimon with hybrid in its form and or 1 blue tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. But the reason why we're playing this card is because it's still just trying to help with the overall consistency of what the deck is trying to do. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Syakomon. So Syakomon is in the deck just because it's an anti-meta floodgate card to try to stop and limit some of the opponent's actions. So the actions it's trying to limit while on the field is during the opponent's turn. The opponent can't reduce their Digimon's Digivolution cost, so it's just trying to make them actually play their cards a little bit more fairly, unless they deal with Syakomon. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of ModokiBetamon, acting again as another anti-meta floodgate card. His All-Turns ability will stop the opponent from gaining memory, except by Tamer effects, to limit their memory manipulating shenanigans and make their decks a little bit less efficient until they get rid of ModokiBetamon, which is then putting resources towards killing ModokiBetamon versus killing or dealing with other cards. Next, onto the level 4s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Leomon. So this is the BT01 Leomon, and this is a really good card just because, well, it's a Leomon to play off of our Jeri, and it's a Leomon to use with our Gomamon for its on-delete ability, because Leomon's on-delete ability states that we get to gain 2 memory, and in combination with this in Gomamon means that we get to gain a total of 3 memory, which is just pretty good to gain some instant memory to not only enhance and extend some of our plays during our turn, to, let's just say, set up some tamers or do various other things, but to also potentially take away from the opponent during their turn if Leomon is able to survive the security checks. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Kumamon. So Kumamon is a really good hybrid for this deck to be using just because it's fitting in the Tommy line, which is the preferred line for blue hybrids to be playing around with because of the whole strip and stun gameplay style to allow us to easily aggress while stopping the opponent from attacking. So what Kumamon is doing to help set this up is act as another source to try to get rid of the opponent's inheritable sources to make our abilities easier to trigger. So he could Digivolve on top of a Tamer as if it was a level 3 Digimon, so that's just your stereotypical hybrid ability, on top of the fact that when we Digivolve into him, whether it's off of a normal Digimon or a Tamer, doesn't matter, we get to trash out 1 Digivolution source from the bottom of one of the opponent's Digimon to try to set up our card's abilities with. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Korikakumon. So Korikakumon is just another hybrid to use in the Tommy line, just because, well, the Tommy line is just that good. So he has different ways that we could evolve him, so we could evolve him for 3 on top of a level 3, for 1 on top of a level 4, or for 2 on top of a Tamer. So just that flexibility makes him a really good card to already want to use. His Wind Digivolving ability states that if a card with hybrid in its traits or Tommy is in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then one of the opponent's Digimon can't attack or block until the end of their next turn, so this is one of the primary cards we're going to be using to stunlock the opponent's Digimon with. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Leomon. So this is the brand new EX version of Leomon, and it's basically doing what the old Leomon is doing, but better. So it has 2 abilities, an on-delete ability and ability that triggers during the opponent's turn, where during the opponent's turn, while we have a Tamer in play, which is going to be super easy because we're a Tamer-based deck, this Digimon gains the blocker ability. So it actually is acting as a solid defensive tool to be using, just to help try to stop some aggression, or if we wanted to, we could still aggress with this card, just because there's no downside for it attacking. Then, on top of that, it has its own on-delete ability, where we get to gain 2 memory and draw 1 card, so it's just a good card to use as a chump blocker to gain that extra resources, or to attack and try to, again, gain those extra resources, and put this in combination with Gomamon, and we'll just be able to gain even more resources. And then the last Digimon of the deck, and only level 5 Digimon of the deck, is going to be 3 copies of Beowolfmon. So Beowolfmon is just a good card to combo with our blue hybrids because, well, if we're already trying to Digivolve up our stack, then this allows us to do that a little bit more cheaper and efficiently, where if we Digivolve this on top of a Digimon that Digivolved on top of a Tamer, then we get to reduce its Digivolution cost by 2, making it Evo for 1. Then, on top of that, his when attacking ability is the primary reason why we're actually playing this card outside of his efficient evolution, where we get to return 1 Digimon with hybrid from its Digivolution source back into our hand, to be able to bounce one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to their hand. So the whole idea on how we're utilizing this card is not necessarily for the control and bounce. It's nice. We're just trying to use this card to add back our hybrids, so that way we have extra hybrids and level 4s to use to Digivolve on top of our Tamers, to have extra hybrids to be able to push the overall aggression of what the deck can possibly do. Next, on to our options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Howling Memory Boost. So Howling Memory Boost is a really good option that synergizes with what the Tommy hybrid line wants to be doing. So its main ability states that we get to trash up to 2 of the opponent's Digivolution sources off of one of their Digimon from the bottom. Then one of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources can't attack or block until the end of the opponent's next turn. Then this card gets placed into the battle area for its secondary main ability of Delay to gain 2 memory at a later turn. So the fact that the Tommy line already wants to strip and stun is what makes the Tommy line so powerful, and we have a nice option to help support and facilitate that. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Starlight Velocity. So Starlight Velocity is a pretty underutilized card compared to all of the other hybrid-based options. But in this style of deck, it's an absolutely insane card to combo with just because we have some really powerful on-play abilities that we want to try to take advantage of, mostly with our Tamers. So what this card is doing is it's basically acting as a Kaiser Nail, where it allows us to play 1 Tamer or 1 Digimon with hybrid in its traits from one of our Digimon's Digivolution sources as a Tamer or Digimon for free, so we're mostly going to want to use this card to separate our Tamers to be able to re-get their on-play abilities again. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because, well, we can only run 1 copy because it was limited. So what Ice Wall is doing is still acting as one of the best defensive tools that the deck can possibly use, where we get to have all of the opponent's Digimon gain the ability of, when attacking, losing 2 memory, essentially taxing each and every one of their attacks to try to help de-incentivize them from actually wanting to attack until the end of their next turn. So it's just a good card to just try to help buy us a turn, and that 1 turn could make or break a lot because we could potentially aggro them out utilizing that 1 turn. Then on top of that, it has a pretty decent security ability, basically acting as Hammer Spark to gain us 2 memory, which is basically taking away 2 memory from the opponent to try to stop and limit some of their actions. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Hammer Spark because, well, it's just a good card to use for some instant tempo. So its main ability states that we get to gain 1 memory, which we could use to help extend and enhance some of our plays, and then its security ability takes away 2 memory from the opponent because we're gaining the 2 memory to try to stop and limit some of their actions as well. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis is still just that good of a card to use for virtually every blue deck, and this deck is no exception. So it's going to be acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer, so if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just hard set us to 3 to be able to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. Then he has an on-play ability himself that's acting as some extra consistency, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 blue and 1 green Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So even though we don't have a green Digimon, we have plenty of blue Digimon, making him just one of the best searchers that we could possibly use, especially in combination with Starlight Velocity to be able to split him apart, to be able to get some extra searching going with his on-play ability. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Sora and Joe. So Sora and Joe still is just that good at gaining us some extra memory just because Blue Hybrids wants to play around with this strip and stun strategy, and Sora and Joe helps facilitate and reward us for it. So at the start of our turn, if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then we get to gain 2 memory, acting as some good solid extra memory gains, so that way we can make even more powerful plays possible, because what Blue Hybrids generally likes to do is try to chip at the opponent, then in the mid to late stages of the game, utilize a whole bunch of memory to be able to hybrid swing, hybrid swing, hybrid swing, and there goes the game. And on top of that, this card is really good in the mid stages of the game to help us strip the opponent's Digimon, because its secondary ability states that during the opponent's turn, when you attack with one of your blue Digimon, we get to suspend this Tamer to be able to trash up to the bottom 2 of one of the opponent's Digimon's Digivolution sources. So it itself is helping us strip the opponent of their Digivolution sources to put them in range of our abilities. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Tommy. So Tommy is going to be the primary Tamer that we want to Digivolve on top of mostly. Starlight Velocity helps us want to Digivolve on top of almost any of our other Tamers because of Starlight Velocity, but Tommy himself also has a really good on-play ability on top of an inheritable ability for our hybrids to take advantage of. So his on-play ability states that we get to trash the bottom 3 of one of the opponent's Digimon's Digivolution sources, so it's just, again, helping strip the opponent away of their Digivolution sources to be able to put them in range of our Stunlock abilities, and to make Upamon and Kyaromon a little bit better. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability for our hybrids to take advantage of, where when we attack once per turn, until the end of the opponent's next turn, one of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources can't attack or block, trying to stop some of their aggression and stop some of their defensive plays to allow our Digimon to swing even easier. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Jeri. So Jeri is going to be one of the new key pieces for how this deck wants to work, because she has a nice on-play ability where we get to play one Leomon from our hand for free. So this is really good because not only are we setting up a tamer, but we're also setting up a Leomon as well. And as you saw with our Leomons, mainly the EX Leomon, it could act as a really good defensive tool to stop some of the opponent's aggression, especially early on. Then on top of that, she has a nice secondary ability that's acting as some good resource generation, where when an opponent's Digimon attacks, we get to suspend this tamer to draw 1 card, so it's just acting as some more card draw for the deck to help with its overall consistency. And then, as I stated before, with Starlight Velocity, this is just a really good card to Digivolve on top of. Split apart with our Starlight Velocity to be able to re-get her on-play ability to be able to play a Leomon for free. So it's just a really good card to help facilitate the overall game plan on what the deck is trying to do. And then there's still just a whole bunch of different tech and tools and different ways to approach the Leomon sub-package, because it is just a sub-package. So if you wanted to, you could swap out the main engine with a couple of different other main engines, or some of those parts and pieces, or even combine them all together. So if you wanted to, you could play Leomon inside of the Gomamon package, just because that extra resource generation could help facilitate and enhance what Gomamon is already trying to do, on top of the fact that we could play a slightly different blue hybrid package with what we're already playing. So if you wanted to lean more into the Koji package, then we could play some more of the Koji package and some more hybrid support and synergy. Then on top of that, we do have the new tech and tools that we got from EX2. So if you wanted to, you could play the new Xiaomon as a really good Digitama, just because we would mostly be playing with level 4 Digimon anyway, to permanently give it plus 1000 DP. And if we are doing that, then we probably would want to lean a little bit more into jamming, which is kind of what Koji and the Kendo want to do anyway, where we could use Labramon and Sysramon as some extra points of aggression and extra points of draw engine as well. Then, if you wanted to, you could even think about splashing a little bit of yellow and go into a DNA Digivolution route, just because we do have a yellow Leomon that we could play off of our Jeri, and it does have a really decent security ability, on top of the fact that we have Kyaromon to help act as a really good card to hard play to line up our yellow Digimon to be able to DNA Digivolve with. Then, in terms of the cards that we actually want to DNA Digivolve with, we have Kyaromon and Syakomon as really good DNA Digivolutions to end off on. So even though we're not going to be playing a whole bunch of different colors with Kyaromon, just the fact that we could play our cards a little bit cheaper and efficiently than some other decks, just to allow Kyaromon to be pretty solid as a card to utilize it just to DNA with, just to get some extra swings with. Then in terms of Syakomon, like I said, we do have some nice yellow cards to help make it possible to be able to play him and help recover, which could set the opponent off because we're also aggressing at the same time. Then, as far as some other good options go, we just have a whole bunch of different good options that blue could run. So we could run cards like Innocent Blizzard, we could run cards like Rattlestar, we could run cards like Kakaitis Breath, all to just try to help bounce and stop the opponent from being able to aggress, while we have cards like Fist of the Beast King and various plugins to be able to help us aggress onto the opponent, while we have cards like Blue Memory Boost to help with the overall consistency of the deck as well. And if you do just want a cheap budget replacement for Davis, then you could run TK just for some extra card draw when the opponent is attacking our blue Digimon, but it does help with the whole consistency and card draw engine of what the deck could do. But this is all just my interpretation on one approach to try to utilize the Leomon package, and I do think that Blue Hybrids is one of the best engines to help facilitate what Leomon is trying to do, and it actually makes the deck a little bit more aggressive. I still think it's going to be a fun deck that you can make, and it's going to be a relatively cheap deck that you could possibly make, depending on some smart substitutions to be able to have something fun, effective, and powerful. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.